Hello, all you friends and neighbors, you sisters and brothers, citizens of the world. We're here for you with another edition of Heartland at Home. This is for the week of February 7th, and we are real glad that you're joining us. We're going to have a report from our Thailand correspondent, Bill Paige, and we have a visit with the extraordinary Turk Burton, musician, author, and all-around wonderful human being. Thanks for joining our conversation. But first, as we do each week, let's hear a good thing from one of the hosts, starting with Katy. What's going on in your life, Katy Hogan?
Well, I get to visit with a couple of girlfriends today. We're going to walk that nature trail over at Western and Peterson and have some outdoor burgers. and then I'm going to go get my second shot. So there's all of those good things. How about you, Tom? What's happening with you that you like?
You know, this big pile of snow we've had the last few weeks, which is now melting off, produced a genuine snow person. The grandma and the grandson went to town with great packing the other day, and it was a classic snowman with all the branches and really neat hair and the carrot with the nose. It was quite a lot of fun, pure joy. And I think we need pure joy in these times more and more. Michael?
Well, I had a real good time this weekend. I returned to my film work. This time it was not a Hollywood Andy Davis movie, but a senior project for the School of the Art Institute with Carly Sorgan, who is a good friend of my son Hal. And they put together a script and a project called The Home. And I walked into our house last Saturday afternoon, and none of the pictures were on the wall or nothing. I got to work in this film wearing my late brother's tuxedo. And on Sunday, we went up to the Adlai E. Stevenson home in west of Lake Forest, and I'm blocking the name of the town, but it was just cold and snowy and beautiful. And we got to shiver and, be before the cameras.
Wait till you see the picture of Michael in a tux. It's something to behold.
Yeah, people like it. They tell me I should do it more often. So I have to get it altered. My brother was a bigger man than me in many ways.
So some of us get our shots, Katy, and some return to normalcy. People begin thinking about how should we not be returning to normal? You had some ideas about the next issue we ought to be looking at.
We're trying to do that every week because really there's an awful lot of things that were shown to us in the last year that tell us we should not return to normal.
Yeah.
The wage equity issue that comes to the fore is it wasn't bank presidents and hedge fund managers and lawyers who were delivering our food to us or ringing up the register when we went scarily to get our food in supermarkets. They also weren't the people who were delivering medicine to people from Walgreens if they needed it. So one of the things that we should not return to normal about is ignoring the fact that the essential workers, garbage people, whoever is growing and transporting the crops as well, the people who stock all the stores that we can still use, we need to enact a nationwide minimum wage. And at this point, $15 an hour for one job for a teenager or a 20-something is okay, but it's not okay for a head of a household. And for these people who have served us so hard, so well for the last year, how about a minimum wage of $35,000 or something so that they can actually only do one job and go home at night and rest and see their kids. Anyway, that's this week's not returning to normal. Wage equity issues.
One other issue we've been covering that we shouldn't return to normal on is dumping our waste in the southeast side. The hunger strike to try to prevent a metal shredder plant that's been moved from Lincoln Park to the southeast side continues. There are over 10 people now that are coming up on 20 days of fasting to try to get the mayor to not issue a permit. Check out several different places on Facebook where you can sign a petition or work in solidarity with these hunger strikers. It's a very important issue, particularly for residents of the 10th Ward in the Southeast side.
Illinois this week got
Fantastic
rid of cash
news.
bail. I mean, an entire array of really important criminal justice reforms passed and got signed by the governor this week. And we are the first state to do that, to completely end cash bail. It's nice to be first for something in Illinois for a change.
We don't want to dwell on it, but what about that effort to replace the speaker's seat in the House?
Excuse me while I laugh.
This was the real head thumper for me this week. The guy lasted, 2 days in the job? A 27-year-old up and coming assistant ward superintendent didn't quite make the ethics grade. We're not sure quite what happened, but the ethically challenged Michael Madigan pulled a rug from under his own replacement pick in 2 days.
Maybe we'll get someone Latino instead.
Well,
Given that that's a fairly heavily Hispanic district now.
The city council did pass an exciting resolution this week. Michael, you want to report on something some of our friends have been working on for a while?
I would be glad to. You know, for many, many years, in fact, since about 1958 or 59, the U.S. has been encouraging this embargo of Cuba, trying to starve the revolutionary government and the people for many, many years. And this week we did it. We passed a resolution. It was R 2020-616 that calls for an end of the embargo of Cuba. I think it passed unanimously in the city council. And we really want to give a shout out to the people, a lot of our friends, Marguerite Horberg, Marilyn McKenna, all the people in the Chicago Religious Leadership Conference. They've been working on this for years. And, you know, there was a short time under Obama where the travel restrictions were abandoned and we could travel legally to Cuba. I, of course, have gone a few times illegally, but look forward to traveling there again. And I encourage many others to do so. Thank you, City Council.
Okay, I remember when it was hard to get masks.
Yeah.
Right? It was hard to get masks. President Biden has ordered up 25 million free cloth ones. I don't know when they're supposed to get here, but there's an administration in DC now.
Another sign of a working government. The administration is looking at why we're having trouble getting semiconductors to finish building cars. That and several other critical supply issues have really begun to surface, including the fact that China has a corner on much of the precious metals that we need for those semiconductors and other things that keep the parts and machinery of our economy moving. So it's interesting to see that the current administration is looking more carefully at things like this, the stuff around the corner that we don't pay attention to in tomorrow morning's headlines. I bet our friend Bill Paige, who we're going to talk to in a few minutes from Thailand, might have a few ideas about sitting out there in the Pacific Rim, which is holding on to all these precious metals and stuff. So we'll talk to Bill in a moment. Let's have a little respite from Los Lobos with Arizona Skies.
The other night when I was watching a basketball game, I happened to look at my computer and there was an email that had just popped up, and it was from Bill Paige over in Thailand. He was just waking up and putting out the word to his friends around the world that he would love to talk, and we did. And it occurred to me that he had been on our show earlier. He had talked about what was going on in Thailand. All kind of stuff was coming down in Myanmar. And I thought, hey, Bill, why don't you join us for a little report on your what's going on in your little corner of the world or big corner of the world. So that said, good morning to you. Good afternoon or evening. It's evening for you. It's morning for us. Tell us what's going on over there in Thailand and what the Myanmar situation, how it impacts you.
Well, greetings from the future. It's Friday morning, just after midnight. So anyway, I woke up the other morning and I started hearing stuff on the BBC about the junta, the military takeover in Myanmar, and I was like, how far exactly is Myanmar from me? And it was, I looked at the two major cities at about 650 miles away. So it's not really that close, but it's not really that far either. I mean, a lot of what's going on there is paralleling what's been going on in Thailand for the last year. There have been a lot of there have been weekly youth protests here over all kinds of things. I mean, the COVID situation, democracy issues, issues related to the monarchy. And so people have been in the streets. They've been met with water cannons, rubber bullets, tear gas sometimes. And I was like, well, the same thing is going on in Myanmar right now. And the situation, basically the bottom line is it's not good for anybody in Asia. All the partners in Asia, Cambodia, Vietnam, Hong Kong, Malaysia, nobody's really too happy about it. China, they don't care, but because they're China, but everybody else is kind of impacted. I mean, Thailand, gets a lot of labor resources from Myanmar, does a lot of border trading with Myanmar. And so those things are all being impacted. And the economies of, the economy of Myanmar mostly is suffering because their currency is being devalued. Their banks are paralyzed. Their businesses can't open and function. And so the situation is horrible, mostly because it seems to be intractable. The military leaders are saying they're not going to change the situation. They're going to keep this emergency state of decree, they're going to keep the power for at least a year, and then maybe they'll see if they'll do new elections after that. The protesters, the people, however, they want nothing less than the military to acknowledge that the results of the November election were legitimate and put the Democratic elected leaders back in power, let them out of jail and put them back where they belong.
Are you observing, when you just talked to the issues that you're speaking about in a regional kind of sense, that the Asian mindset across many nations is, we
Right.
wish this wasn't happening, which is interesting. It's an interesting.
Well, it is interesting. Well, just this week, the new foreign minister of Indonesia semi-secretly came to one of the airports in Bangkok and met with the prime minister and the foreign minister. And only when it came to light that this had happened did they make any kind of comment, which was to say, no comment. Some of these meetings are held unofficially sometimes. And so
in addition to Myanmar and Thailand, India is also in upheaval, which is huge, given that they're the biggest democracy over there. And citizens, in the streets. Do you think that what has happened in Myanmar and Thailand, starting with Thailand last year, like you said, is it contagious? Is it like Arab Spring, only in the Far East?
Well, it's, look, democracy, people want democracy. I mean, everybody wants to be free.
Yeah.
We learned this from the Rascals in the 60s. Overworld, over sun, easy to see. People everywhere just want to be free.
Amen, my brother.
And so You know, there, and it's a lot of young people. I mean, older people from what I see. Again, I'm a visitor. I'm a guest in this country, and I've only been here for 3 years, so I can't really know all of the finer intricacies of everything that's going on. But it seems to be a very youth-driven thing in Thailand. I'm not sure what it is in Myanmar. I think it's more, from what I'm hearing, it's more broad-based in Myanmar.
It
It's
is.
more
It is.
all economic sectors and business sectors.
Well, part of the problem
It's bad
for
for me.
us older folks is COVID. It's scary for us to go out in big crowds. So the youth it's all on the youth this year to carry forth the revolutions.
Bill, could you speak for a
Well,
moment?
you know, go ahead.
Could you speak for a moment to the particular challenges, I'll call it minority ethnic populations in Thailand, the Rohingya, but I also have to think of the Uyghurs in Western China, as
And the
well as those
Hmong.
small farmers in India that are upright and are in protests against central government agribusiness kind of measures. How are those folks figuring into this broader geopolitical struggle that's going on between the military and the elected government? Because that was part of the tension there, is that the elected government wasn't treating those ethnic groups or allowing the military, it seemed, to go after the Rohingya, so to speak.
Rohingya.
Yeah,
Thank
no,
you.
I don't know everything about the Rohingya situation in Myanmar. That's something that I would have to really unpack a little more seriously if I was going to take a look at it. What I will say, though, is that the governments here are relying on, have relied very heavily on tourism as a main source of income. And with that having dried up, there has to be a shift in mindset about who they're going to support and where they're going to put their money to support those people, and so that they have some sort of an economy and some sort of a life again. The minority populations, I think, they're very small, and so you've got you've got some small populations that I don't know if they're being mistreated. In this country, I don't see it. I see a beautiful country with about 97% of the people living a Buddhist lifestyle where they take care of each other. And of course, nowhere is perfect, and things, injustices happen. But in terms of the political situation and the economic situation, I think their numbers are so small as to be sort of insignificant in that regard.
Bill, I know from having the great good fortune of traveling around the world myself, that it's always one of the most amazing things is being an American outside of the US of A. And so what I want to ask you now, at post-inauguration, post-Capitol insurrection, how does America feel to you now from away? And do you want to come home yet?
I feel very fortunate to have sort of made the expat experiment when I did.
Good move.
And it was, and there's very little Schadenfreude involved in it for me, a little bit, but mostly my heart goes out to people whose lives have been affected so tremendously. Lived in Texas for 7 years before I moved here, and the situation there is very portentous, I think. I mean, it's going to, that is a situation that every state has to look at. And so, no, I'm in any big hurry to come back. I mean, America's great, but it's, a long time ago in my professional life, somebody asked me to write write a magazine about at life Dubai. And this is almost 30 years I wrote this. Dubai. I interviewed some expats, some people that were living that lifestyle, and I don't know, something must have stuck in my brain because all of the things that are wonderful about living abroad, different culture, different foods, different people, and something I had a Zoom call with Frank Orrell from Poi Dog Pondering. I don't know if you guys know Frank or not, but something that came up in my Zoom call with him a few weeks ago is that I liken my situation here to the isolation tank experience. You know, John Lilly, the dolphin guy, invented this deprivation tank where you float in total silence, total darkness. I'm sort of in this culture where I don't really understand 95% of what's being said around me. I can't read signs. I cannot, everything sort of blurry. And so that's allowed me to turn inward and do a little more inside work. So that's a good thing too.
Yeah, Americans, we always need that inside work.
Absolutely. When you're up in the, I was a wage slave for 35 years. And when you're doing that, you really don't have a lot of time to reflect. You're surviving and you're getting the money to make the payments. I don't have to do that anymore. And it's kind of a more comfortable way to live.
Well, we're going to hear back from you, I'm sure, over time with great things that you're doing and what's going on in your section of the world there.
I think people need to look at the Myanmar situation. They need to look at what's happening to Da Sue, find out what her situation is. No one's heard from her. Nobody's heard her since she was jailed 2-3 weeks now, total silence. And even though there's been sanctions from Biden, there's been sanctions from Canada, there's been sanctions from the UK, it's all kind of hollow threats. And I don't really see any action happening that's going to do anything in the short term. But rest assured, the ASEAN leaders are getting together and they're going to try to find for a pathway forward to some discussions, because they know that this situation, on top of the COVID economic impact, is just it's gonna wreck everybody's economy just a little bit, and they can't afford it at all.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I cannot imagine. Well, Bill, we're gonna probably leave you shortly and listen to some Night in Tunisia with our next guest. But do you like being a sometime correspondent to Heartland at Home?
Sure, I love the chance to, it's such a, I have to just say, when growing up, what do you learn about Thailand? Nothing. You learn The King and I and Yul Brynner, and that's our Thai experience as kids growing up. So it's really nice to be able to share the cool culture here. I mean, it's tomorrow rather is Buddha Day. It's a big day of Buddhist celebration. It's about forgiveness. It's about redemption. It's about making merit, being a good person, and so holidays are always a lot of fun here. So I look forward to that.
Thank you so much, Bill. It's great to see you, and I know we'll check in again soon.
Namaste.
Okay, guys. Good to see you all.
See you, brother.
Sawadee Kap.
Sawadee
Kap.
Sawadee Kap.
Really excited to bring Turk Burton to our microphones and camera this morning. a wonderful jazz Congo player, but boy, does he have some other stories to tell us this morning. Welcome to Heartland at Home, Art T. Burton. What were the early days for you like in the Association for the Advancement of Creative Musicians, AACM, a rather famous Southside avant-garde jazz group that's influenced so many people, including yourself? Can you tell us a little bit about AACM?
It was very exciting for me. I came aboard in 1973, and I was introduced by a percussionist who lived in Harvey, Illinois, named Amon Ra. He played drums, and we used to play conga drums together. And he said that he was having a concert with the AACM. At first, I thought he was kidding. And then he said he had Muhal Richard Abrams on piano, he had Malachi Favors on bass, and he had Wallace Macmillan on reeds, and he was playing drums, and I could play conga drums on the concert. And I said, sure. So I went down and met these guys. I had read about them in the newspaper a little bit, and it was a great concert. It was at Child City on 87th Street. And I guess they enjoyed what I did because they invited me to join the AACM, which I then did. And it was a very exciting time. A lot of the musicians became internationally renowned. And I met all the gentlemen from the art ensemble, which one of them, Malachi Favors, I had played on my first concert. But it was very exciting. And I knew they were doing some cutting edge type of things, and they got international recognition at that time, and had traveled to Europe to play quite a bit. And so it was very exciting. I mean, you know, the musicians, we had guys coming through town who would come back and play with us. And the bigger thing for me was joining Muhal Richard Abrams' big band. I was able to do that after Don Moyer, who was traveling with the art ensemble. He was the regular percussionist at the time, and he was not there that often. So Muhal decided to utilize me as the percussionist in the big band. And I was there for approximately 3 years, actually up until Muhal left and went to New York City. But that was a great, we had people like Henry Threadgill, Ari Brown, Wallace Macmillan, just a large number of Chico Freeman musicians in that band that, you know, was outstanding. Claudine Mina Myers on piano. Asia Rama was the drummer, and he was the last drummer for Gene Ammons in Chicago. It was a great time, great period, and I got to play with quite a few musicians, and I fronted some of my own concerts also at that time.
Michael.
Art, how about sharing with us the influence that the Latin jazz greats like Mongo Santamaria, Willie Bobo, Tito Puente, their influence on you? And while we're at it, our old friend, the late great
Kalon
Phil Coran, talk a little bit about all these guys and how they might have influenced you.
Well, when I first started playing conga drums, the only conga drummer that was getting visibility was Candido. And he was on the Ed Sullivan Show. And I was, 10, 11, 12 years old at the time. And then Mongo Santamaria had a big hit with Watermelon Man on the radio. And it became a huge hit. And I started following his music. And then when I got a little bit older, every time he came to Chicago, I tried to always catch him. And I did have conversations with him, which was magnificent at the time. And I would think that Mongo Santamaria, in terms of drummers, he's the greatest drummer I ever seen, stick or hand, period. It would be like magic. I would always sit down near Mongo when I caught him as close as I could. And I could hear certain things, but you couldn't see it. He was a great drummer. I was too young to ever see Chano Pozo, but Mongo Santamaria was special. I also listened to Willie Bobo quite a bit, and he was also an excellent percussionist. There were African Americans that I also tried to listen to because I knew I was not an Afro-Latino. And there was a group out of St. Louis called the Quartet Trebien, and they had a drummer named Percy James. And then here in Chicago, there was a conga drummer. We called him Master Henry Gibson, and he had played with Odell Brown and the Organizers, and he also had played with Keelan Phil Coran. And he became very famous once he joined Curtis Mayfield. But he was outstanding, and he was also an influence on my drumming. But the Cubans, if you study hand drumming, they took African drumming and took it to a whole nother level. And I appreciate what they have done with the drum. I've tried to develop my own style of drumming, and it's a compendium of Cuban drumming, African American drumming. And also I try to stay cognizant of things that came out of New Orleans. The best African American drummers in the United States come out of New Orleans. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact of Congo Square, which is what I call my bands, Congo Square. But Congo Square was the only place in the United States where African music was played over an extended period of time. And it came to cease being around 1870 when the city of New Orleans put a squash on it. But Congo Square was very important in terms of the development of jazz music as we know it and other musics. But New Orleans is a great place, still is a great place for African-American music. So that's some of the people. But Armando Peraza was the first drummer professionally I seen in person. And him and Mongo grew up together. And he's also an excellent conga drummer, bongo drummer. And I really appreciate, one of the things that was kind of nice that growing up, I led a funk band in the late 60s called the Soul Naturals. And that band won the Illinois State Battle of Bands. And we went to the Nationals in Raleigh, North Carolina. And we came in second in the nation in the contest. Some of us felt we should have won it, but that's a whole nother discussion. But so I did that.
Let's ask Michael. Why don't we ask Art about why he's wearing a cowboy hat, and let's get on that side of the story.
I think we're getting pushed by our timing here, but you know, during these in the past year or so, a lot of people in this country are learning a lot more about the role of African Americans in the history of the nation and things that have gone on. And one of the things that I'm aware of and have followed somewhat, and I could take it by your hat and what I know about you, you're into, is the Black Cowboy. You know, whether it be the Buffalo Soldiers, the Black Cowboy, people having moved west to Oklahoma. Talk a little bit about the Black Cowboy, your interest in it, and maybe tell us some stories about Bass Reeves, the Black Marshal, Lone Ranger, all that kind of stuff. Roll with it.
Okay, my mother's from Oklahoma, and I have relatives, male and female, who are cowboys and participated in rodeos in Oklahoma. And going down Oklahoma as a kid, I always thought it was like going to the far side of the moon because you didn't see Black cowboys in movies and television. And I had a whole retinue of people in Oklahoma. And they lived in a little black town that was called Arcadia on Route 66 in Oklahoma. And they would ride horses all day. You know, my family owned cattle, and so they would herd cattle. And so for a long time, I just thought that was something that Black folks in Oklahoma did. I didn't have no history for it. And so as time went on, and especially after I got married in the 1980s, I decided to try to research and find out what I could about the Black participation in the Wild West. And in 1991, after quite a bit of research, I wrote the first book on Blacks who were outlaw and lawmen in the Wild West. It's called Black, Red, and Deadly, Black and Indian Gunfighters of the Indian Territory, 1870 to 1907. And Indian Territory was pre-state Oklahoma. And that's the only book yet that talks about Blacks who are outlaw and lawmen in the Wild West strictly. And, you know, it's focused on that. In 1999, I wrote a second book called Black, Buckskin, and Blue African-American Scouts and Soldiers on the Western Frontier. And that's the only book that talks about Blacks who were scouts in the West, but it also includes mountain men and other instances. My third book is Black Gun Silver Star, The Life and Legend of Frontier Marshal Bass Reeves. And I talked about Bass Reeves in the first book I wrote, but Bass Reeves is the greatest frontier lawman that I've come across in the Wild West. He served for 32 years. He was a deputy United States Marshal, had been a former slave, had escaped as a slave to the Indian Territory. He learned Indian languages, and then after the Civil War, he served as a scout for lawmen working into the Indian Territory, arresting felons. And then in 1875, he was given a commission as a deputy marshal. And his career was just outstanding. He arrested over 3,000 felons during his career. He killed somewhere upwards of 20 people, but he was more proud of his detective skills. He arrested his own son for domestic murder. He arrested the preacher that baptized him for selling bootleg whiskey. This guy, he was something. He was
Don't want to cross him.
Yeah, and in the biography, I wrote about the fact there was a lot of similarities between him and the Lone Ranger. He rode a white horse at one time. He handed out silver dollars. The Lone Ranger handed out silver bullets. He worked in disguise regularly. That was part of his MO, like the Lone Ranger. People didn't remember his name. They just called him the Black Marshal. And the Lone Ranger broke in Detroit in 33 on the radio, 1933. And the majority of outlaws that Bass arrested were sent to the Detroit House of Corrections in Michigan. And so we can't say conclusively that Bass was the inspiration for the Lone Ranger, but there's a lot of parallels. And actually, the Lone Ranger's last name was Reed. He didn't have a first name, but Reed is very close to Reeves. And so I think that there could be a possibility, but we really won't know. But actually, Bass was bigger than the Lone Ranger. He was a great lawman.
Well, speaking of that, how was it what was it like to get Bass Reeves named in the Great Westerner Hall of Fame, which I think you had a lot to do with? Am I right?
Right, that's true. When my book came out in '91, Black, Red, and Deadly, Bass had the biggest chapter in the book, and I decided at that point to get him and try to get him into the Great Westerners Hall at the National Cowboy Hall of Fame in Oklahoma City. Cool. And I pursued it, initiated it, and it went through. I was overjoyed. And
when did that happen? When did that happen?
I believe that was in 1992.
Oh.
Yeah. So I was real happy that happened. I did have my most recent book is on the Black Outlaw, Cherokee Bill, who is Black Outlaw most people have never heard of, but he was just as fantastic as Billy the Kid, and more of an outlaw than Billy the Kid.
All right, let me follow up on talking about black cowboys. There is a rodeo that used to be out of Pembroke or down there by Kankakee, a black rodeo. Right. You know about those? I went to it one time, and I know there's probably more than just one, but tell us a little bit about black cowboys today.
That rodeo was a Thurl Ladding production. Thurl passed. I think his children kept it going. But Thurl's biggest rodeo was at the amphitheater, which was at the stockyards. And he ran a black rodeo every February for Black History Month. And it ran for a whole week. And he would bring cowboys in from Texas, California, Oklahoma. And he put on a good rodeo. I was sad to see the amphitheater get torn down because that brought an end to that rodeo. But African Americans have been a part of the cowboy culture from the inception. Sure. The early days in East Texas and East Oklahoma, when slavery was in effect, they had blacks who were herding cattle and working cattle. And then after the Civil War, at least a fifth of all the cowboys who trailed cattle from Texas to Kansas and Nebraska were African Americans. And sometimes all the cattle crews were black, trailing those cattle from Texas to Kansas. That's something you don't see in movies or television, but Yeah,
Art,
they were there.
Mr. Burton, you are, again, we are so lucky in some of the guests we get. You're one of these Renaissance guys. You're a skilled musician, and now you've written all these books. Where do people find your books?
Oh, I have a website, artburton.com, for my books, for my writing, and it will direct you. All my books can be purchased at amazon.com, but the website, and then for my music, it's turkburton.com, and it can direct you there where to get my music. So
That's terrific. Is there still an Oklahoma expats picnic on the South Side?
no, it came to an end. I don't know when it ended exactly, but there used to be a big one in Washington Park, and it was called Oklahoma Day, and it was held on a Saturday, I believe. And there was quite a few people here on the South Side who were descendants from Chicago. I think, if my memory serves me right, I think Purvis Spann, or
The Blues Man.
not, if it's not Spann, it's the gentleman. It was one of those guys that used to be from Oklahoma. I think it was another one named South, but I don't remember now. But one of those gentlemen had descendants from Oklahoma. But there was a lot of people here from Oklahoma. I mean, there still are a lot of people here who are descended from Oklahoma folks. And most of the blacks from Oklahoma, they either went to Kansas City or Chicago or Los Angeles. That's where the majority of the blacks who left Oklahoma. Oklahoma at one time had 40 black towns. And they had, that's the most black towns of anywhere in the United States, where blacks had formed towns. And this had happened primarily after the Oklahoma Territory was opened up for settlement. They did have approximately 5 black towns prior to the introduction, because the Indians had African slaves. And when they went to the Indian Territory in the 1840s, they took their Africans with them to Oklahoma, pre-state Oklahoma.
Art, can you shed any information on the Black Cherokees in Oklahoma?
Yeah, the Cherokee actually, prior to the Civil War, were the largest slave owners in the Indian nations. And many of the people, and they recently, the Cherokee freedmen, because blacks who were formerly enslaved afterwards were known as freedmen, after Oklahoma statehood in 1907, because the state government allowed the Indians to sever their relations with their black constituents. They just recently got their rights back in Oklahoma, in the Cherokee Nation. So the Cherokee freedmen have all, I think the other 5 tribes that had brought slaves, there's still some contention and some legal things taking place to trying to get those blacks to get their citizenship rights within those Indian nations. But the Cherokee had a large group of blacks within their nation.
Before we let you go, and before we listen to Baldhead Gerald, your piece, where do people pick up your music now? You said at the other website,
Right.
Burton.
Yeah, the streaming, much of the music can be found on streaming platforms, or like CD Baby, but or Amazon.com. And I know the Bald-Headed Gerald is a performance I did with Ari Brown, and Ari's CD Venus can still be purchased on Amazon, and possibly found on these other streaming channels too, for people to listen to.
It sure is nice to meet you.
Oh, likewise. It's fun. It went really quick.
Yeah.
We'll see you again.
All right, that sounds good.
I'm looking forward to meeting you up close as soon as the pandemic thing works out.
That's great. Great. Adios.
sports this week, Michael. What do you got? Anything?
Well, I got a little brief report. The Bulls are getting real fun to watch, and I recommend people check them out. And they are in sixth place in the East, which would put them into the playoffs. And I noted the other night they put up a thing that said the White Sox will be doing an exhibition game on TV this weekend. And I'm not up on the Cubs, but I'm rooting for all our teams, and it won't be long till we'll be looking at them right here in town.
Another event we want to make sure to let people know, our dear Lynn Orman Weiss and her incredible project, Women of the Blues, is opening at Delmark Records Gallery March 1st. So look for Women of the Blues, Delmark Records Gallery, March 1st. Shine on, Lynn.
And now, in memoriam, I'm sorry to share that our friend Skip Andrews, who was a co-founder of the People's Law Office and the lead attorney in the Fred Hampton murder trials, has passed away. He was in Oregon. He was active up until the end, doing good in the world, and we're real sorry to hear about you leaving us, Skip, but we'll see you someday in another place.
A shero of mine and of many women of Catholic descent and also of Central America interest, Diana Ortiz. She was an American nun who was tortured in El Salvador around the same time that you all remember 4 nuns were killed in El Salvador. Well, Diana survived, did a lot of good work, and now she has gone home to her reward. Blessings be.
Another giant who passed on from his final journey, Lawrence Monsanto Ferlinghetti. This is a poet who back in high school was so influential, coming out of the Beat generation of so many of us making the transition from kind of traditional art forms to something new and different. He was an American poet, yes, but also a painter and a social activist and co-founder, perhaps most importantly, of City Lights Booksellers and Publishing. We thought it would be important to have a reading of some of his poetry, and indeed we're having our wonderful ace WLUW announcer and intern and editor of this show every week, Louis Mejia, who's going to read along with the oldest member of our crew, Michael James, a selection from Lawrence Ferlinghetti.
Sometimes during eternity, some guys show up, and one of them who shows up real late is a kind of carpenter from some square type place like Galilee, and he starts wailing and claiming he is hip to who made the heaven and the earth, and that the cat who really laid it on us is his dad. And moreover, he adds, it's all writ down on some scroll type parchments, which some henchmen leave lying around the Dead Sea somewheres a long time ago, and which you won't even find for a couple of thousand years or so, or at least for 1947 of them to be exact. And even then, nobody really believes them or me for that matter.
You're hot, they tell him, and they cool him. They stretch him on the tree to cool, and everybody after that is always making models of history, with him hung up and always crooning his name, and calling him to come down and sit in on their combo as if he is the king cat who's got to blow, or they can't quite make it. Only he don't come down from his tree, him just hang there on his tree, looking real petered out and real cool, and also, according to a roundup of late world news from the usual unreliable sources, real dead.
All right. That was wonderful, guys. That was beautiful. Thank you so much. As we have for over 25 years, live from the Heartland, and the pandemically inspired Heartland at Home is broadcast on Saturday mornings, 9 a.m. at Loyola University's WLUW 88.7 FM. It's also streamed live at WLUW.org, and it's posted on YouTube at youtube.com/Heartland Media. And if that's not enough, we're also on cable. On CAN TV, you can see us at various times all week long. So thanks for joining us. We
Please
hope
do good in the world.
the world needs all the good we do.
All power to the people.